Hey team, welcome back to another episode of the Strength Game Podcast. I'm your host, Nick O'Brien, and this is episode number 24. The Strength Game is a weekly podcast dedicated to discussing all things physical culture with the coaches, athletes, iron enthusiasts, and experts deeply embedded in the strength game on both sides of the profession, both as coaches and as competitive athletes. I want to thank everyone who has liked, shared, and commented. Your support allows us to continue to bring on expert guests and highlight more individuals in the strength game, just like our guest today. I also want to thank Cerberus Strength for bringing you this episode for free. Trusted since 2012, Cerberus is making the best strongman, powerlifting, and strength sports equipment and accessories, ensuring the ultimate competitive edge. Every one of their products is tried, tested, and proven by top-level athletes worldwide. Whether it's competing on the big stage of World's Strongest Man or training at home in the gym, Cerberus Strength equipment is reliable, durable, and of course, strong enough to handle all your training goals and needs. If you're in the market for the highest quality strength conditioning gear and equipment, be sure to check out CerberusStrength.com and use promo code STRENGTH_game to save on your next order. And in this week's episode, I'm joined by a friend and former colleague of mine, James Perez. Perez is the Assistant Director of Football Sports Performance at Stanford University. Prior to being elevated to his current role, he's had previous stops as an assistant strength coach at Fresno State University, as a director of athletic performance at Sacred Heart Schools in Atherton, California, a physical therapy aide at PT Northwest, as well as professional internships at both Stanford University and the University of California, Berkeley. Perez was a dual sport athlete at Willamette University as part of the baseball program for 2 years and the football program for 4 years, before beginning his professional career overseas in the European Football League. Perez competed in the 2011 and 2012 seasons in Finland as a triple threat defensive back, wide receiver, and return specialist for the Jyvaskyla Jaguaarit. Like I said, I'm excited to have him on the show today and catch up. So with all that said, let's get in the game with Coach James Perez. Hey, what's going on, guys? I'm excited. I'm joined by a former colleague of mine down at Fresno State who is now over at Stanford with the Cardinal again. James Perez, what's going on, man?
What's up, brother? Excited to be here, man. I think this is an awesome project, and I was pretty excited when I saw that you were kind of putting this thing together and getting it rolling, using the best time in quarantine, shelter in place, what have you. You know, it's crazy times we're living in, so it was cool to see you take advantage.
Yeah, might as well use the time, and it's always good to catch up. So, hey, I want to get right into it. What kind of got you started in the strength game, like lifting, and kind of leading into what you had? You had a collegiate career and you had a professional career in football. But really, what kind of got you going before you got to that point?
Oh, man, a lot of things. I don't think we have enough time, but I would say getting into lifting and stuff, my dad was a team photographer for the 49ers and the Oakland Athletics when I was growing up. So obviously around professional sports and a lot of behind the scenes as far as their training, got close with the doctors and PT coaches on staff there, obviously traveling with them and working with them a ton. And basically shut me down from trying to play football until I was in ninth grade. Wouldn't let me throw a curveball until I was in high school, you know, and it was all coming from these professional team doctors and sports med folks just saying, like, this is what we're finding. People are starting it off too young. My dad was a big, as most parents, you know, big anti-concussion person. And I was a very, very tall, lanky, thin kid. And so, you know, every year for my birthday in March, that's when Pee Wee signups were. And every year I was slightly disappointed because the rule remained the same. You know, you're not strapping it up until ninth grade. The other prerequisite was I had to start lifting consistently. And so I would say about middle school, my dad was getting up at 6 a.m. and heading over to 24-hour fitness. And he's like, hey, I'm driving. You want to jump in with me before school? if you really want to make this happen, you got to start to commit to this process a little bit. And so that was kind of like my first exposure, obviously not to any structured training, just because that obviously wasn't his background, but the dude was all about staying in shape. And again, that was a mandatory prereq for me to start playing ball. And so I was kind of in the mindset of doing anything. So I hated it at first. I was getting up at 5:30, 5:45, heading to the gym. There's barely anybody there. I'm in sweats and a sweatshirt. He's all fired up and rolling. And I'm just like, man, like, it sucks. I'm weak. I'm skinny. This doesn't seem like the place for me. And so that's kind of like where the lifting side got started. And everything was machine based. In 24 hour, that was his program. And so I just basically, he'd hit a set, I'd hit a set. And we do leg day where it was leg press, leg extension, seated leg extension, prone leg curl on the hamstring machine, and some calves and core, to nauseum. And then we were done for the day. And then we'd come back and we'd hit the seated, chest press and the military press and the lat pull down and some arms and core again, and that would be our upper body day. And we just basically, recycled that over and over again. And truth be told, it was always a mandatory thing once I got into high school and playing ball. So I kind of had the assumption that was always going to be a part of my process in my life. So that kind of got me to that point of like, okay, well, if this is going to help a scrawny kid like me get faster, stronger, be able to hold my own, and ultimately have dad sign the permission slip, that's all I really cared about, and so that's kind of like where it started getting, started. And yeah, played through high school, and then was fortunate enough to have some walk-on offers at some Division I programs in the area. But wasn't heavily recruited whatsoever out of high school, and got called by a small school, Willamette University up in Oregon. And they were the only place that was offering to let me come and play football and baseball, which I was a big baseball guy as well. And I was like, man, they had the major I wanted, which was exercise science. Never had been up to Oregon at all. Went on my recruiting trip in the spring on probably one of the top 10 sunniest days of the year. So I was completely fooled once I finally arrived in the Northwest and had my 9 months of cold, dreary weather. But yeah, that's kind of where that got rolling, and had a great experience. Played baseball for 2.5 years, and then football for all 4. Just got to a point where the defensive coaches and myself, I played defensive back. And, that was a wild experience. I played multiple sports in high school, but playing 2 sports in college is a whole other animal. Especially the fact that just because, and, everybody listening and in our world understands that, like, you're not just preparing for one season and, hey, see you in 6 months. You roll right into the next phase of whatever that year looks like. And so after football season in the spring, I'd be going to 6 a.m. workouts, going to class till noon, 1 o'clock, and then baseball for 5 hours, from 2 to 7 in the afternoon. And then when spring ball started hitting for football, I would do baseball from 2 to 6 or 2 to 7, and then just throw on shorts, a helmet, and cleats, and jump out to football spring practice from 7 to 9 at night 3 days a week. We're traveling for baseball Friday through Monday. And it was awesome. I wouldn't take anything away from the experience whatsoever. Thankfully, my parents weren't allowed to see my grades because I was 18 and it's all on me. But, my grades definitely started slipping. I obviously wasn't getting the most out of my off-season training with football because I was playing another sport. And so it kind of got down to the choice of, what do I want to finally, for the first time in my life, commit to one sport and see what that does for me? You know what I mean? And And so I made that really hard decision, walked away from baseball my junior season, which was going to be my last off season for football. And just, lived and breathed football, did everything I could, spent a lot of time in the weight room. Luckily for me, I had a bunch of close teammates of mine that were into supplemental work and things outside of what we were committed to doing, and just completely, put my head down and went to work football wise, and it paid off. I was in the starting rotation going into that season for the first time at defensive back and special teams. And then our quarterbacks coach at the time played in Europe for about 7 years following his career in Oregon State. And his old team was looking for a DB/wide receiver for their program. And so he hit me up and, just said, "Hey, was this something that you'd be interested in? You get anywhere from like 500 to 1,000 euros a month. They put you up in an apartment, give you a bus pass. They pay for your meals. And, obviously your round trip to and from wherever you're going." And I was like, yeah, let's do it. This is a dream come true. Obviously my NFL aspirations weren't on the table. And so, yeah, jumped into kind of a training for that setting, which was a little different. And then our season was, training camp started in May, and the playoffs and the championship run would finish up in early October, late September. So I went to Finland for 2 years, played for 2 seasons out there for the same team, which was awesome. There's a lot of guys that will get into that professional realm over there and kind of jump from team to team, which there's obviously nothing wrong with that, whether they're going into a different country or jumping onto a different team in the same league. It was really awesome to have that continuity of going back to the same team with a lot of similar teammates, the same coaching staff. We were pretty young my first year when we got over there, and frankly got our ass kicked. And so it was cool to kind of see how some of the guys developed, and just went and had that experience. And, it was awesome. Like I said, you're not making a ton of money whatsoever. I would say it's kind of compared to minor league baseball over here. Like you're bussing everywhere. The facilities aren't that phenomenal. We're wearing 30 different sponsor patches on our unis and our helmets and stuff. But at the end of the day, I was getting paid to do what I love the most and go and experience the rest of the world at the same time. And that's where I kind of saved and spent a lot of the money I was making, was just kind of backpacking on bye weekends. And after the season, like I said, we weren't very, very good the first couple of the 2 years I was there. So our season got cut short, but my return flight wasn't until after the championship game. So I would usually do like a 10 to 14 day, backpacking trip through Europe and go and check as much out as I could while I was there. Knowing that, once I would get back to sort of reality in the States, that it was going to be time to jump into a career and kind of do something that would allow me to reach a lot more of my life goals,
That's cool to hear. I know it's a little bit of different going overseas to kind of play that, and like the culture and everything of, it's still professional level, but it's interesting to hear. It's kind of like minor league baseball where, yeah, you're kind of in the middle. There's another step to kind of go forward, and it's, some people might make it out of there, some people might not. And it's just understanding the kind of environment you're in, even though it is professional. We had a lot of guys that, you're allowed 3 Americans. They called us imports. I thought that was a little, prejudice, but that's all right, per team. And so you're getting a wide spectrum of talent from the States. Me and 2 of my teammates from Willamette, 2 of my best friends to this day, all got recruited and signed to the same pro team in Finland. So that was a whole nother awesome experience in itself. But we were the only D3 football players in the American pool that were over there. Everybody else was coming from Power 5 and Group of 5 schools.
We love the challenge of seeing how we kind of measured up to some of these guys, because on Saturday and Sunday when we're playing these games, it's finished talent versus finished talent is kind of how you get the matchup. And then it's the American versus the American, whether it's DB and wide receiver or a linebacker and running back or O-line and D-line, kind of one-on-one battles. And they're relying on our talent and us as kind of the game driver. You know what I mean? And so it was cool to meet a lot of different players from around the country who understood the American side of things. But there were definitely guys that got really homesick and thought that it was a very whack situation over there, you know, being touted as professional ball. And then you get there and there's maybe 1,000 people in the stands. You're playing at a soccer stadium that's been converted to a football field. You're dressing in a like pop-up locker room, you know, from spot to spot. You're driving for 5 hours anywhere in the country for your game. You're lucky if you have a full staff of trainers and strength coaches and PTs and whatnot. You know, like that was another thing that was, and you know, we'll kind of get into that later, but that was another eye-opening experience. Was like, I have an injury. Like, what are we going to do about this? And it's like, well, dude, there's the lake right there. It just melted from the winter snow. Like, why don't you go hop in that for 20 minutes? You'll be all right. I'm like, okay. That's their version of a cold tub. I understand ice and contrast therapy. I understand how that works, but like, what if I've got something acute going here? So, it's a different culture. You just have to, you know, kind of leave your ego at the door and embrace everything that happens. You know, I mean, we had guys scarfing down McDonald's before games. That was their favorite pregame meal. You know, our bus ride over there, they'd have these sausage, you know, sandwiches and snacks like pregame. That just wasn't my routine. You know, obviously being a collegiate athlete in the States, like you're getting packets thrown down your throat. You're having someone come in all the time and coach you up on hydration habits and eating habits and all of that. And over there, you've got to create a lot of that structure for yourself on top of everything's in a completely different language. So even going to the grocery store and trying to figure out like, okay, well, how can I meal prep for the week, or at least like set myself up, you know, for success nutritionally as just a small component of my performance. That's a whole nother set of challenge and adversity and some other things that you got to deal with. But it forces you to immerse yourself in the culture and really embrace the experience. So a lot of great, overall phenomenal experience and a lot of great things to take away. A lot of shaking head moments and just like, man, what the hell am I doing here some days? But, you know, all in all, I wouldn't have changed it for the world.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you're gonna get a mix of both positive and negative ones where you're gonna be shaking your head, and then you're gonna get someone you're just like grinning ear to ear. And it's probably a very big experience. It was very important, and I'm sure it helps you now, kind of in your current positioning, and it helps you like now within your coaching role. So, I mean, when you went over, obviously, like you went from a collegiate style to a professional. And on top of that, you're in a foreign country. You kind of touched on some of the things that made it like very unique and kind of made the situation a little bit different, because you're going college, professional on your own. You're going from Oregon, probably 8,000 miles away, to a country that you can't speak the language. From that experience and stuff, like what are some of the takeaways that you can kind of help with your athletes? Because you work with a lot of high-level football players as well that are looking to play in the NFL or CFL, or maybe go overseas as well. Like, what can you take away from your situation that you can relay to them to kind of get them more prepared for that next step?
I think it's the biggest one is just taking over ownership over your process. It doesn't stop once you walk out of the door or you're finished being coached. You know what I mean? You got to have that intrinsic motivation to really hone in and polish up and commit to all the other components that play into performing at the highest level in your given sport, you know? So all the things that you and I preach on a daily basis in our job, with just the sleep and the hydration and your lifestyle outside of the building. And then once you are here, just committing your focus and everything that you can to the task at hand and what you're trying to get out of the situation. And going from a collegiate structure where I'm being, as a freshman, drinking out of a fire hose, to being spoon-fed all of this knowledge and stuff throughout my 4-year career, to then having to create that on my own, it really tests your commitment to the whole process and the whole deal, So for me, I would go over and I'd show up for spring training camp, play through the season, and then I would fly back home, have a 9-to-5 job, and then have to train myself before or after my job, to stay in shape and run and lift and do the recovery techniques and take care of myself the best I could, with no one really waking me up or pushing me to do so from an external standpoint. So I think it's really helped me just drive that perspective on the intrinsic side of things and owning your process. And then being open-minded, I think is another big thing. We as strength coaches, at least I feel like you should be doing this. You're constantly looking for ways to offer a better service or a better product to your athlete. It forces you to sometimes get out of your comfort zone to go and hit somebody up on social media, email another coach, or drop in on a clinic, or, reach out to somebody, or jump into a book or a resource that someone else has recommended to you. That's one aspect of it. And then you've got to download that knowledge and communicate it to your athlete in a way that, A, the only reason I'm bringing this into the picture is to make you better. And B, I think what's very unique about the athletes I work with here at Stanford is they want to know the why so much more than any other athlete I've ever worked with at any other school. And it's a double-edged sword, I think, in a good way. One, from a credibility standpoint, if you can't have the why conversation with your athlete, you're in trouble, because they'll sniff it out and they might stop coming to you for answers, and so for us, one of my big mentors, who was the former director here at Stanford, Shannon Turley, his biggest thing first day you walk in the door is understand that these guys are smarter than you. They are at Stanford University as a student first, and then as one of the elite athletes in the country. So you gotta bring it every day, as far as having that knowledge base, being able to have a conversation with a 17 to 23-year-old, highly driven, competitive young man, who say, well, hey, coach, why are we doing this mobility technique? Or why is it that we are doing this bench rep scheme? Or why is this shoulder or scap or core or single leg or single arm or whatever we're doing, movement, how is this helping you? And you have to be able to speak to it. And I think from a communication standpoint as well, that's where they've got to have an open mind. You have to have an open mind to be able to bring in a lot of different tools and concepts, and at the end of the day, offer the best service. And I owe a lot of that perspective to being in a different country, very east side oriented strength and conditioning. Oh man, like put chalk on your hands and we're pulling from the floor, and then we're going to go outside and we're going to throw 200 pounds on the sled, and you're just going to push and pull it for 45 minutes, And that was my first like, I'm not kidding you. That was my first day in Finland. I woke up, we went to the training session with our strength coach, and we were dragging a metal sled up a gravel hill with 100 pounds on it, just marching up and down. And that was our warm-up for 30 minutes. We go into this dungeon in a basement with literally there's just rubber on the floor. Everything is oxidized and rusted and chalked up. And there are some big dudes in there getting after it. and they're just stacking. And that was kind of my first introduction to a different style of training and the Scandinavian culture of lifting. You know, I mean, those guys were just, it was, let's throw the knee sleeves on, let's wrap our wrists, let's throw the squat belt, and we're going to blow a hernia before I let this weight beat me any rep and set that we're going to do. So, you know, and so I'm sitting there kind of scratching my head. I'm like, well, you know, like I'm all like, this is an awesome culture. I'm appreciative and grateful to be here, but we're playing football in 2 weeks. You know, like, is this the best thing for me? You know, and so me kind of diving in and having a compromise there, being like, okay, well, I'm not going to big time this culture. You know, I'm the small fish in the big pond, so to speak, as far as this way of doing things. So I'll hit it and I'll do what this guy's asking me to do. But that also means I've got to jump like crazy on the recovery side and all the other elements so that I'm not broken going into my job, you know, essentially. And so that was an awesome experience. You know, the recovery techniques over there, very old school. We're doing our contrast baths were in saunas and freezing cold lakes. That's literally what we would do as a team after practice, after a weight session, you know, and all the other social aspects in the summer. The Finns love to have a good time. And so, you know, jumping into that and then, again, immersing yourself in just all the different aspects of training and culture and being a professional athlete and being a part of that community and team, you know, it's lent itself to give me a lot of different communication skills and grabbing and being open-minded to different ways, like I said, that I can better my service to my athletes.
No, that's a lot of great points. I mean, just from immersing yourself in there, like that's kind of lend yourself to where your position is at. I know from the different spots you've had, like throughout your coaching career, they're vastly different, like just with the culture of the team, the dynamic of the city you're in, the conference, whatever it is. Stanford is a very unique place. And that's a great point. Like, I think more people could take that away, even if they don't work at Stanford, that maybe not necessarily like every student athlete's going to be smarter than you at every single school. Sure. But if you can defend your program without an ego, if you can explain things, and I think in this day and age, we're starting to see it more from athletes, even if they're not like with you at Stanford. People want to know the whys behind it. They want to know. And if you can justify your program and explain it in terms, you're going to build buy-in. So you don't not necessarily need to play professionally per se, but you have to be able to relate to them. Like you've gone through extensive training. You played in college, you've played professionally. So, and then you know what you're talking about with all your coaching elements and your cues and your physiology. So all those different things culminate to bring a better service, a better product to the athletes. And then they have more trust in you when they ask a question and you can give them a response. That's huge.
Yeah, no doubt. And again, I think the disclaimer is that I'm working with some of the smartest minds in the country, but I'm also the expert in training and performance compared to them, right? So as intimidating as that might sound in the first few weeks that I was here, I also know what I'm doing. And I'm not saying that to obviously be cocky, but like, if we're in that conversation, and this goes to all coaches, like you're the expert in that conversation. You know, the athlete, I think we get it misconstrued sometimes that the athlete's poking holes or asking questions because they want to break down or try and, find the loopholes or find discrepancy in what you're saying. And that I found more times than not that that's not the case. It's to your point. You can explain the situation. Now they're invested and committed to it because they know the why. If you're just yelling at them and blowing the whistle and we're doing 21-10s just to do 21-10s on the field, and you can't tell them why, you're not gonna have as much buy-in. And I think out of all the aspects in what we do, this is the least glorious component of their career. It's one of the more strenuous sides of things. They're getting up early or they're staying late. They're getting out of their comfort zone physically and mentally on a daily basis, and we're forcing them there. You know, we're creating that environment for them. And it's hard. It's challenging, you know, and to your point, I think going through it as an athlete, there's relatability and there's buy-in there. The knowledge and education that you can translate into terms that they'll understand is the other aspect of the buy-in and the relatability there. So I think it's kind of twofold. You know?
Definitely. Hey, so we kind of talked about it a little bit already, like and you touched on it with building trust and finding that buy-in with the athletes. And since you do have collegiate experience and professional experience, and not necessarily every single coach is going to be able to play that sport or play at a high level, like, do you think it's more beneficial for someone having played a sport, or is it not necessarily a prerequisite? And then outside of that, like, since you have played at so many different levels, what end up being some of the universal truths that you kind of see for just athletes in general?
Good question. I think it's beneficial, but I don't think it has to be a prerequisite. The benefits of it, you know, that you kind of touched on are a lot of that intrinsic motivation, commitment to the process. You can walk the walk as you're talking the talk, because you've been through it and they know that. And so there's that trust built in there that what you're having me do, I know is for the betterment of me, because you're not going to lead me to something that's going to injure me, that's not going to help me perform at the highest level. And that relatability piece, when they're sucking wind and it's Friday and we just kick their butt all week long, and you're trying to push them through that last set or that last rep or whatever it might be. And I'm telling you know, it's that conversation like, listen, come with me, go through it, trust me, you're going to come out on top. You're going to be better for this on the end. Let's go do it. You know, I think playing the sport and having that background and career lends itself. I'm not just saying stuff to say it. You know, I can lean on the fact that I've lived it and I've experienced the results. You know what I'm saying? Like I said, I wasn't, you know, this is something I talk about sometimes with my athletes too. I wasn't the biggest or the most athletic guy. I was fairly athletic, enough to get on people's radar. But like I said, I was tall and lean, and the training and the weight room process is what gave me a better shot at playing at a high level. And just sharing that story sometimes with athletes, or them knowing that you have a background in this stuff, can help pop off that buy-in aspect, like we keep coming back to. If you don't have that experience, like I said, I think it's a benefit, but I don't think it's going to be a detriment to your career or what you bring to the table as a coach. I think the two, I'd say the major curve that I would say some people would deal with is the coaching side of things. That different dialogue, how to approach different athletes in situations. You know, I've been very fortunate to have a spectrum of coaches in my career, as far as ones that I still stay in contact to this day. I lean on for advice, not just in my athletic or training or coaching career, but in life. There are also some that, like, I still get a little bit of anxiety and PTSD from just thinking about some of those experiences with them. Not that they would put me in harm's way, but just the way that they dealt with me and my teammates on certain occasions, the negative reinforcement versus positive reinforcement, and kind of the blend of the two. I think the tact in how you coach is something that you're going to have to throw yourself in a lot of different situations to sharpen that sword, and sharpen that tool in your aspects of coaching. You know, I think a lot of people there's such a spectrum in our profession of like the culture side of things and the programming side of things and the science side of things. I think I strive to meet somewhere in the middle because I don't think you can have one without the other. You know, you could write the best program in the world, but if you don't have buy-in, it won't be executed. You could be the rah-rah and you could have all the good quotes and you could have all the good motivational speeches, but if you're not setting your guys up or your girls up physically with a solid, comprehensive performance program, you're also not going to get where you want to go, in my opinion. So I think having a perspective on both and constantly striving to find ways to get better on the coaching and communication side, especially if you haven't had the experience as an athlete or coach prior, is crucial.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. There definitely is a dichotomy to it. And there, like you said, there's a spectrum of both sides. And I think anybody that plays too far to one side, you start losing sight of the other things that are crucial to coaching. And coaching can't really pinpoint exactly what it is. And I've asked people before, like, to try to narrow it down to one word or narrow it down to one sentence. And you can do it and you can find something that you feel is more important to you, but you still miss so many different things. And if you're always so narrow focused on one aspect of coaching, you're missing something else. And we have to kind of be jacks of all trades, and you have to be a little bit involved in everything because there's so many things, like you said, it's comprehensive, that just encompass what we do, how we interact, like the art, the science of it, the programming. There's a lot of things in it, but I like what you talked about, like sharing your story. And a lot of coaches end up, for whatever reason, I don't know if it's just the ones I meet or just most coaches are like this, a lot end up being the ones that found the weight room and realized that training was going to get them to the next level. And we almost want to tell the athletes that had more talent than us, like showing them, hey, if you do this, like you have the ability to go farther than we did.
Oh yeah. And back to the experience piece, I think the biggest thing for me personally and selfishly was I had built a life with an affinity for that athletic community and that culture that I originally I was going to hit the physical therapy route. And so I went to school and got my exercise science degree and started interning and then getting paid as a physical therapy lead at a local PT clinic in Oregon when I was up there training in between my seasons overseas. And it was cool, like I love the clientele. It was everybody from the geriatric population to a couple of athletes every once in a while, and then everybody in between. And my job as the aide was setting up their ice or hot pack and their e-stem, maybe taking them through some of their rehab exercises after they were done seeing the PT for physical manipulation or range of motion or massage or whatever techniques they were using at that time. And again, love the people that I worked with, but it just got to be so slow from what I was used to. And, when you're sitting there with, a sweet old woman and she just had shoulder surgery 2 days earlier, and I'm sitting there in the chair and we're trying to get her to do some overhead pulley, just range of motion stuff. And she looks at me like I just said, we're going to cut off her foot. It just got to be very challenging personally and frustrating personally because we're going to do 2 sets of 20 on the overhead pulley with this 75-year-old woman who is just coming down from pain medication. She's not happy that I'm putting her through this, even though this is what she needs. And it was just, again, love the people that I worked with. There were some brilliant minds in there and some concepts that I still kind of lean on today as far as that patient interaction. Some of those PT concepts, even with my guys that I'm working with, if we've got some individual injury or rehab stuff, I still kind of pull from notes and experiences that I pulled in that setting. But I knew that I couldn't have a career doing that and feel good and fulfilled about what I was doing. And so I'll never forget, I was oh my gosh, Skyping. If anybody remembers Skyping, now we're obviously on Zoom and Teams and all these other platforms, but I was Skyping with my mom when I was in Europe, and the season was about to end up, and I'm like, Mom, I don't know if I can go back to Oregon and go back to this clinic. I need to change this up. You know, I need to find something a little bit more intense and comprehensive and back in the athletic community. She's like, oh, well, why don't you coach football or coach baseball or something? I'm like, you know, that'd be fun. Like, I wouldn't have an issue with that. But like, I've also kind of seen my college coaches both on the football and baseball side, and I don't know if that's the lifestyle I want to leave. Ironically enough, here we are. Yeah, so I mean, this is literally how I got my start in collegiate S&C. She sold a car to an assistant strength coach over at Cal, and he was on the Olympic side. He was the associate director with Olympic strength and conditioning at Cal, and they were looking for interns. And so I went and interviewed because I moved back home to my hometown in Petaluma, which was about 50 minutes away, and went and interviewed. And he's like, yeah, I think you'd be a good fit. Let's, you know, you want to show up, first team 6 a.m. on Monday. And I'm like, what? Okay. So my commute from Petaluma, I'd have to get up at 4 a.m., leave the house no later than 4:30, get in by 6:15, 6:20, park the car in public parking because the close parking you all had to pay for. And I was already paying for gas, my bridge toll, and I wasn't about to pay for a $10 daily pass in the parking lot. So I had to park like 6 to 8 blocks away at 5:30 in the morning in Berkeley, California, which I don't know if you've been, but you'll run into some characters at that time of night or morning, depending on where that person's at, and make my way to the Haas weight room and go to work with teams and learn from those coaches. And I worked with every sport over there until about 3 p.m. I would jump in the car to try and beat traffic back to Petaluma. And then I was coaching the varsity football program on that staff from 3:45, 4 o'clock to 6. And I ran the strength and conditioning program for them after practice. And then I would get up and do it again all over again, Monday through Friday. And then was working construction for my dad's best friend on the weekends, just so I could at least make money. So I digress, but that's kind of how I got into coaching, and just found out that I just love that aspect of it. There was a component of the science and the physical therapy and the functional movements and the orthopedic side of, wow, like this is a throwing athlete versus a change of direction athlete versus a linear athlete. Wow, these are the different energy systems that we need to train. Okay, maybe a baseball player can bench press, but is that the best thing for their shoulders, elbows, and wrists? Maybe we're doing some more dumbbell work or neutral grip work or whatever it might be, because we need to take care of their shoulders, but they also need to be strong. You know, so all these different aspects, I had no idea. And it's kind of funny, right? Being a collegiate athlete, getting put through the paces, being a professional athlete, I started to get a little insight to what components went into training and performance, but really it was just the packet I got from college. I'm just repeating it because I'm like, well, the professional coach that's telling me that this is what I need to do, I'm sold. He's convinced me that this is the plan that I need. Knowing what I know now and going throughout my career, we were a little off base back then, but you know, that's what's so awesome about our career anyways, is it's forever evolving. We're constantly figuring out better ways to do things. You know, and I think, to go back to your definition of coaching, the 3 words that constantly come to my mind are being an educator, a motivator, and an innovator. The education piece, you have to have that knowledge. You have to be able to have that conversation with your athlete. You have to be constantly educating and seeking out better ways of doing things to give that comprehensive service to your athlete, first and foremost. If you don't know what you're talking about or what you're doing, it's going to be kind of hard to get a job and maintain the job and get that build that relationship and commitment from your athletes and your coaches, the sport coaches that you're working with. Secondly, the motivator obviously has got to be there. You're putting them outside of their comfort zone on a daily basis, all for the betterment, but it still sucks. Like, there are still a lot of aspects that don't feel good, and so how do you get the kid to wake up every morning and start jumping on that grind and attacking the goals that they've set for themselves, stay motivated to do it for 6 to 8 weeks straight before they get a break, and then go and compete on a daily basis is not an easy task to do. And the innovation piece kind of ties back to the education and the motivating piece for me is like, you have to be innovative about how you communicate with certain athletes. Some athletes are going to accept a certain style of coaching or respond to a certain style of coaching better than others. Whether you're working with lacrosse or football or wrestling or basketball, whatever the sport is, you've got a million different personalities that you need to be able to communicate with. And so being innovative about how you do that, being innovative about how you train the athletes and not getting stuck in your ways and being able to take a step back, think outside the box. I think for a lot of us in this challenging time with COVID and the pandemic, it's forced a lot of people, whether they wanted to or not, jump outside of that comfort zone for them and think outside the box. Okay, I've got an athlete on the East Coast that is in the middle of a blizzard right now. How are they going to train at home without taking a 5-day, 7-day, 10-day period off to where we got to ramp stuff back up again? Okay, well, let's think about what they've got at home. All right, well, they drink milk. They've got water bottles around. They've got backpacks and duffel bags. Like, start loading that thing up with water and load those things up with books or clothes or whatever you can do, and just start to get creative about how you're doing things. And I know for us as a staff, and specifically myself, it's tapped into a whole different side of my brain that I've gotten to dust off some of the cobwebs and dust and be like, hey, you know what? Like, man, this TRX single leg squat, assisted single leg squat is a mother, especially if I put it on, if I can't add any load to it. Okay, well, maybe I'm throwing a 10-second eccentric onto it, or we're just having them pause and get an isometric at the bottom. Man, maybe I should start using this for a lot of my quad tendon guys or some of my younger guys that I'm trying to teach in pattern to keep their knees, hips, and ankles all talking to each other in a correct way. Well, how did I come to that realization? It was because all our guys have are TRXs in their room. So, you know what I mean? I think this has forced us to get creative and think outside of the box. And I think we can come away being better coaches for it.
No, that's awesome. And I love the definition. It's only fitting that you working at Stanford, you have like everything kind of squared away with your definition of what coaching is and what you're doing in the program today, what the purpose of it is, why it is. And you can like eloquently, like just basically spit it out right away because it's already in your frame of reference. You know what it is. It's defined. It's ready to go. And I always like hearing people's like intern stories because it's that love-hate relationship. Like, you got to go through it. I don't like when people kind of try to skip that process. Everybody's got to grind it out in the beginning. And that's what makes you find out if you really want to be in this or not. And if you really enjoy it. And everybody like can say like those driving, like whatever it was, 2-hour drive, parking. I remember all those ones too. And it just makes me remember and like appreciate what I have now, and hopefully just drives me to be better so that I don't have to go through that process again. Hey, so I got one more for you for right now. And I know you can't play football forever. So I know ball is life, but sometimes you got to hang up the cleats eventually. So why is it kind of important for you to still set a good example and train yourself? And now that you're not necessarily training for a big game or competition, like what's that driving factor and for you to set some goals for yourself? And why is it good to kind of set an example still for your athletes, even though you're not going to play in a big game again?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've from that middle school James Perez to now, I like and have a affinity and passion for lifting weights now, and driving some of those strength numbers. I think that your athletes, and again, we constantly come back to this buy-in piece, and I'm not trying to just beat it down, but if you're not walking the walk, even still, I think that's a huge aspect of things. And I'm not saying that you have to look like a Division I football player. I'll be the first to say it's going to be very difficult for me to do that, but I'm still going to try. And so it's being committed to your own process, committing to time to lift and train yourself. I think a big thing for me, I'm not doing any competitions or anything like that right now, but competing against myself on a daily basis, trying to get stronger in different aspects. I work with the O-line and D-line specifically at Stanford. So me coming in and trying to get them all fired up to go hit 4 or 5 plates on the squat, bench, or whatever it might be, I can't. I'm not going to be able to. I'll tell you right now, I'm not going to be squatting 5 plates anytime soon in my life. But I better be able to toss around some weight, and just so that I've got that aspect of things coming in when I'm trying to pull them and push them, get them going on a day that's going to be very challenging for them. I think when, not right now, obviously, but in pre-COVID times, I think when your athletes come in and they want to pick your brain, they want to talk to you about something, and you're on the floor training, I think, again, they see that aspect that it's not just you blowing the whistle at them all the time. You have a appreciation for the process yourself, and I think that needs to continue. Whether or not you have specific goals or competitions or other things, I think that's a huge aspect to it. What was the second part of that question?
No, you pretty much answered it. Because at the end of the day, your goals are going to be different. So really, I just wanted to see, now that you're not playing professionally, you don't have a sport involved, and you're not doing a strength sport necessarily, but you still found ways to push yourself. So looking at what your training is now and everything.
Yeah, and I'm a new dad. I've got a wife at home. It's important for me. One of my coworkers, Matt Gebert, I'm gonna butcher this quote, but basically paraphrasing, being weak is dangerous, jokingly, but I want to, for on the superficial side of things, I want to make sure my wife stays attracted to me. I want to make sure that I can protect my 2 girls if something hits the fan, so being strong, looking the part, as surface level as that might sound, that's also a small motivator for me as well. So.
No, that's a great point. Hey, so you got to protect them. So that's what it comes down to. Hey, so we end the show like any good training session with a finisher. So we got 4 quarters, 4 questions, maybe a little OT. So take your time on them, or we'll go rapid fire. Answer them as quick as you can. You ready?
Ready.
All right. Biggest influence in strength and conditioning and favorite athlete growing up?
Oh, man. I have a lot of influences. That's a hard question to answer. I think all of the head strength coaches that I've worked under, from my intern days to my coaching at the high school level days, to getting here to Stanford, a lot of the coaches that I've worked with, such as yourself, and other colleagues that I've had along the way, I think it constantly have influenced me. And still a lot of people, thankfully, that I get to stay in touch with. Favorite athlete growing up? Man, that's a hard one. Steve Young is probably my favorite athlete growing up. growing up in the Bay, huge Niners fan. He's left-handed. I'm left-handed. I got to meet him a couple times, which was really cool because my dad being the one of the team photographers and stuff. So, and that guy, I think it was so cool how he wasn't the biggest, most athletic guy on the field, but still found ways to make it happen. And people might argue this, but he's truthfully the first quarterback that started bringing a lot of those running dual threat elements to the game. And so, yeah, I would have to say Steve Young.
Right on. Hey, so when you're not coaching or training, what are some of your hobbies that you're doing outside of the weight room?
Being outside as much as I can, hiking, camping, backpacking, snowboarding. These days going on 3 to 4 rocks around the neighborhood with the girls, golfing, just trying to do things as much as I can outside. I got to be outside.
There you go. Hey, if you weren't coaching, what do you think you'd be doing? And if you could have gone professional in a different sport other than football, what would it have been?
Professional sport other than football would have been baseball for sure. Probably now I didn't pitch. I played outfield throughout my career, but I would have, if I could go back and do it again, being a lefty, I'd try and get on the starting rotation. I think those guys live the best lifestyles. You got one hardcore competition day a week, and then the rest is like, hey, let's go long toss. And on game day when my friends are pitching, I'm spitting seeds and chewing bubble gum in my hoodie and flats in the dugout, and I'm still making a lot of money. And so I feel like that would be the gig. If I wasn't in strength and conditioning, I'd have to say probably coaching football or baseball. That's kind of a cop out, just because it's still involved with sport. Here's an off the wall one. Whenever I go on walks, I love looking at people's landscapes and yards and stuff, and oh man, that's a cool feature, or I like how that lawn or that rock bed kind of wraps around. I don't know. I might have been a landscape architect, or maybe had a landscaping business or something like that. Get my hands dirty, but also have that aesthetic design aspect to it as well.
I think the dad yard vibes got to you too.
Been at home a lot. Been going on a lot of stroll walks and looking throughout the neighborhood. So for sure, guilty as charged.
There you go. Hey, so set up an ideal training day. What's your go-to music or PR song, and what are you eating post-training?
Well, it depends on the lift. Probably for me, if it's a squat day, I'm definitely going Metallica, maybe some hard, kind of folk country. Some of the more up tempo like Chris Stapleton. I've been getting into a lot of that stuff. Going into squat day, got to get the heavy metal going and the rock and get some of that country, heavy hitting. On bench and the look good days, it's a lot of that hip hop and rap, what my guys listen to. I'm not gonna lie, you'll catch me with my head bobbing in the weight room sometimes as we're in the middle of a lift. Go to pre-meal, it's been the same since I was in 7th, 8th grade. It's 2 to 3 instant oatmeal packets and some hot water. Mix it together, throw it down, and with a little pre-workout, get to work. Post, oh man, I'd have to say the some type of egg scramble, like the kitchen sink egg scramble, potatoes, veggies, all the meats, cheese, with some chocolate milk or a protein shake. I could also sub that out for a burrito bowl.
I gotcha. All right,
protein rolling,
Yeah, I like that. I like the good old scramble right there.
Big breakfast stack. Huge.
Oh
breakfast.
Yeah. Hey, I got overtime for you. So, most valuable piece of advice you've received?
anything related.
It could be anything. It could be coaching.
S&C, coaching, life.
It could be life. Whatever kind of sticks out to you.
Oh man, this is gonna be cheesy, but growing up, there was this old show that I used to watch as a kid. I don't really remember it, but my mom remembers it to this day. And there's this scarecrow in it that is like talking to this little boy, and he's kind of nervous about going out for the baseball team or whatever. And he's like, I forget what the kid's name was, but he's like, man, don't worry, like, just go out there and get him, kid. All right. And he like pats him on the back. It's the corniest thing ever. But my mom still sends me that text and did on game day throughout my high school career, my college career. Even if I'm going into an interview or going on game day now as a football S&C coach, I still get that coach or that quote of go out there and get him, kid. And as corny as it is, I think it's just a constant reminder for me that, like, if you're going to bet on anything or anyone, go bet on yourself and anything that you're going to do. Because if you can't, you got bigger issues and bigger problems that you probably need to work on. And so, yeah, I think go out there and get them, kid, just for whatever it is. And I mean, if I kind of look back on things, like, I wasn't the most touted recruited athlete out of high school. I found a way to make it happen. My NFL, MLB hopes and dreams were not on the table a few years later. I kind of found an alternate route to make it happen. And I mean, as better than, or we know, I should say, being in the S&C field, finding a full-time job doing what we do is very, very challenging and difficult. And it's one of the things I talk to my interns and my GAs about on a daily basis is the first job is the hardest job to get. And if you can do it, great. There's something special about you. You made it happen. Bet on yourself. And so I think that's just kind of a creed in the back of my head that I kind of keep in my back pocket if I'm in a stressful situation or I'm having some doubts lingering in. Just go out and get them,
I love it. Hey, well, I can't thank you again for coming on, man. How can people get a hold of you or reach out if they've got any more questions or want to follow along with what you got going on?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram and Twitter, Coach Perez Jr. Both my parents coached me at some point in my career, so that's where the Coach Perez Jr. comes from. And my email, perezjr@stanford.edu is probably the best way to get a hold of me. And yeah, definitely reach out. Let's talk some shop. Always looking to expand the network and tap into other minds. So
awesome, man. Hey, well, I appreciate it. I know you're right down the road. I miss you over here, but
I miss you too, buddy.
It's great to catch up, and I can't thank you enough for coming on, man, and sharing some of your stories today.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me on. Let's do it again sometime.
Of course, man. Take it easy.
All right, sounds good.
That's it for this episode of The Strength Game. Thank you again to this week's guest and to our sponsors, Cerberus Strength. Be sure to connect and keep up with our guests at the links in the description below. Remember to subscribe to us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast provider to stay up to date on all future episodes. Also, check us out on YouTube and CoachO'Brien.com, where you can find all the video versions of these episodes, as well as show notes, episode schedule, and much more. Comments, ratings, and reviews are always welcome and appreciated. Thanks again for tuning in, and be sure to join us next week for another great episode of The Strength Game.